The Legacy of Phrecia 2.0 event is 10 days in, so we're about halfway through the full planned duration. And in this video I wanted to take a deeper look at the meta that's come together in this event, considering a lot has changed since the original Legacy of Phrecia a year ago. In that time, we've returned to regular leagues with 3.26 and 3.27, and both of those releases have added a lot of new mechanics and unique items and balance changes to the core game. In addition to that, the Phrecia alternate ascendancies themselves received a balance pass right before this event went live. So how has this impacted what builds are being played in the event? Well, let's take a look at the ascendancy share breakdown first. In the first Legacy of Phrecia event, the Scavenger, Ancestral Commander and Blind Prophet absolutely dominated the softcore ladder, making up half of all of the builds between just those three ascendancies combined. But in the current event, those three ascendancies have dropped off massively. The Ancestral Commander and the Scavenger still hold a respectable 6% share each for characters over level 90, but the biggest loser of the bunch is the Blind Prophet, down from 15% play rate in the original event to just 1% 10 days into Phrecia 2.0. Now, much of this is a result of the nerfs to Lightning Strike in patch 3.26, a skill that was head and shoulders above pretty much every other strike skill in prior patches. But there's also the direct nerf to the sightless notable that the Blind Prophet received for this event, lowering the base crit for weapons from 12% to just 9%. And considering the rise in popularity for wand attack builds in 3.27, many of those setups won't benefit at all from this notable, keeping in mind that this ascendancy must path through this node to reach the other nodes. Meanwhile, the most popular skill on this ascendancy remains as Lightning Strike in this event, with variants utilising Energy Blade or Dagger or Claw setups for their primary weapon, all of which naturally have relatively high base crit stats. So the upside of this notable is far less impactful than it was in the first event. However, the nerfs to Sightless and Lightning Strike aren't the only reasons for the decline of the Blind Prophet. There's also the fact that the Legacy of Phrecia 2.0 has a bunch of extra difficulty modifiers that the first event didn't have. The gauntlet mechanics from Zizaran's Merciless Gauntlet are in play, and there's also a new Enrage mechanic that supercharges unique monsters when they reach low life. And if those additions weren't enough, each zone also has extra random map modifiers akin to Risk Scarabs to amplify the difficulty even further. This means that builds require a lot more defenses than they did in the previous event. Now, players are also making use of the boot.dev unique amulet because they're the sponsor of this video. Boot.dev is a learning platform that has the solution to all of your back-end web developer needs. You'll be able to boost your skills in languages like Python and Go by making use of the diverse range of courses available. And it doesn't matter whether you're a complete beginner or someone looking to simply hone your skills. You can always choose to skip ahead and jump into a course that's more relevant to your needs. The really great thing about boot.dev though is that the entire experience has been built as a classic role-playing game. That's because bored learners are simply more likely to quit, but if you're engaged and enjoying the process, you're much more likely to stick with it and absorb some of that invaluable knowledge that may land you your ideal job. Now, one of the things that I love about boot.dev is this line right here. The only way to become a great developer is to write a lot of code. But it's not just a quote, because this is exactly what you'll be doing whilst learning on this platform. Learning by doing is the most effective method, and you'll be building real projects as you progress your pool of knowledge. So head over to boot.dev and use code DREAMCORE to get 25% off your first year on the annual plan. Thanks to boot.dev for sponsoring this video. Now, the extra difficulty in this event is also part of the reason for the Surfcaster's rise in popularity. An ascendancy that's able to turn some of their offense into defense via converting their lightning damage into cold damage, further enabling both chill and freeze to slow down monsters, and then utilizing those inflicted chills to lower monster damage output using the Glacial Wave notable, lessening monster damage by half of chill effect. These setups are therefore able to avoid dangerous monster abilities more freely due to the action speed slows they're able to inflict. A particularly useful utility to have access to in this event, considering how common monster haste modifiers are. Now, something else that I want to point out for Phrecia 2.0 is the massive diversity when it comes to primary skill usage. Elemental hit sits at the top with 8% play rate, most of which are Surfcasters, but there's plenty of other archetypes being represented here. Kinetic Fusillade and KBF clustering are there, which is not too surprising considering the massive rise of Wanders in 3.27. Interestingly for Kinetic Fusillade though, which is one of the new skills that was added in Keepers of the Flame, the builds are pretty much split evenly 50-50 between totem setups and self-cast, with the majority of totem variants being played on the Paladin, whilst the self-cast variants are mostly Daughters of Oshabi. Flicker Strike is also a popular skill for Phrecia, which is up slightly compared to the last event, and those setups are mostly Wild Speakers of course, an Ascendancy that provides easy access to charge generation. There's also some spell representation here with Penance Brand of Dissipation, and for minion builds the most popular skill by far is Herald of Agony, which makes sense considering just how good the Herald is for that skill specifically. But let's just go back to defenses for a moment, because whilst the Ancestral Commander did receive some nerfs in a balanced pass that was mostly buffs for all of the other options, this Ascendancy has largely maintained its strengths as a defensive powerhouse, and that's why it's still being picked up by a large amount of players in the hardcore versions of this event. In fact, melee slam builds are the most popular setups in both hardcore trade and hardcore SSF versions of the event for level 90 plus characters, and these builds are made up of a majority of Ancestral Commanders. The easy access to large amounts of endurance charges on top of the mini Defiance of Destiny, not to mention the fact that slams are able to achieve a very respectable damage output with minimal offensive investment. On top of that, the tree is also able to print pretty good axes. This leads to one of the most efficient builds for the event considering its increased difficulty. However, with all of that said, the Herald is also making a big splash in the hardcore variants of this event. In fact, in both hardcore trade and hardcore SSF, there are more Heralds than Ancestral Commanders at level 90 plus. So what's going on there? Well, two of the most popular builds in the event are Penance Brand of Dissipation and Herald of Agony, both being played on the Herald Ascendancy. And whilst one is a caster and the other is a minion setup, these builds are actually quite similar in terms of playstyle. A playstyle which is very beneficial defensively as both builds are able to range and kite and move around a lot while still being able to deal damage. That's a huge upside to have in an event where monsters are typically faster and often deal more damage, and not getting hit is the best defense after all, so it makes sense that the Herald has been able to hold such a high popularity in hardcore. However, in the softcore league, Evasion and Energy Shield are faring very well, with 19% of level 90 plus characters picking up Ghost Dance to benefit from that recovery. But I want to focus on another keystone for a moment, Magebane. This keystone makes it so that your dexterity no longer provides its inherent increase to evasion rating, but instead you gain 1% chance to suppress spell damage per 15 dexterity. This is always a pretty good method to obtain a chunk of suppression chance on left side builds that path to the Scion area, but in Phrecia in particular, this keystone is just incredible on the Aristocrat, an ascendancy that's all about stacking massive amounts of attributes. These builds are able to achieve a large amount of dexterity, and in some cases, they're able to almost entirely solve their spell suppression with this keystone alone, which is insane. That frees up so much space on gear and on the passive tree, so that they can benefit from the defense without as much investment as other builds. Now, we've discussed some of the most popular builds and ascendancies in this event, but what's going on at the other end? What about the ascendancies that aren't being played much at all? Well, the Antiquarian is the least played ascendancy with just 0.4% of characters at level 90 or higher. Part of that, of course, is the extremely limited assortment of viable builds on this class due to the two entry notables, one which halves your dexterity and the other which completely removes your intelligence, making it very difficult to use specific skills or items. But perhaps more surprising than that is the Architect of Chaos at just 0.6% of builds. Now, I do think that lots of the magic has been lost from this ascendancy for Phrecia 2.0 due to the introduction of the Chaos Bloodline class in the core game. Whilst it doesn't provide the exact same assortment of modifiers, it does allow you to do some of the Vow skill chaining shenanigans which this Ascendancy previously excelled at almost exclusively. So in a way, the novelty is no longer there, as you can achieve a very similar result on a normal Ascendancy in the base game. But then we have the third least played Ascendancy in this event, which is the Polytheist, which has only improved its share ever so slightly over the previous event. The Polytheist did receive quite a few buffs in the balance pass, including new modifiers to allow it to ignore some elemental ailments, and curses on top of some of the notables, but these changes haven't really enabled the class to be better options than the others for specific archetypes, and it still feels a bit too generic overall. Now lastly in this video, I want to mention this poll right here that I ran following the previous video, where I asked you if you'd play a Path of Exile event or a League restart with just the Phrecia Ascendancies and no other extras, so no idols or no gauntlet mechanics or anything like that. Thousands of you voted, and 66% would play a fresh start with just the alternate Ascendancies in the base game. So I'm glad to see that I wasn't alone, and there is demand for that. Perhaps that will be an event that we may see from GGG in the future, we'll just have to wait and see. But that's going to be it for this video. Make sure to check out boot.dev, the link is in the description below, and thanks for watching this video. As always, stay tuned and stay safe.